no religion, no government, no institution has the right to stifle one's ability to be educated, one's freedom of speech, and one's freedom of religious belief. So it is with that idea that we are here today. Now, I want to thank a couple of groups before we begin. Atheists United lent some financial support to this day, so thanks to Atheists United. And yeah, you can clap for that if you want. Okay. We'd also like to thank the LA Press Club for making an announcement about this as well. We are selling the book outside. You'll never see it this cheap again. If you are one of our members, a friend of the center, the book is on sale for $19. For everyone else, it's on sale for $22. So we encourage you greatly to buy many copies. And Ayaan will be in the conference room afterward signing the book. So please do purchase one of the books. Now, I would like to bring up the person who's going to introduce today's moderator and today's guest. Eddie Tabash is a civil rights and constitutional attorney. He's also the honorary chair of the Center for Inquiry. Please welcome Eddie Tabash.
Well, it's a singular honor for me to introduce our featured speaker and the moderator. I'm going to begin by telling you about the moderator. Jill Stewart is one of the most sharp-witted commentators on California politics you will find anywhere. She was a writer for New Times Los Angeles, and though we had never met until a few minutes ago when I was going to begin my second bid for the State Assembly in 2000, she described me as a typical West Side 3rd Street promenader. So she has quite a sense of humor. She has a master's degree in journalism from Stanford University and has had her own blog and column on California politics and legislation for 5 years, and is now the news editor for the LA Weekly. And she will be conducting the interview. Our featured guest today is one of the greatest women on earth. She is a symbol for the struggle for women's equality against the downright evil of religious fundamentalism. She courageously has put her life on the line against the worst elements of fundamentalist Islam so that women all over the world may live and be free. Born in Somalia, she trekked throughout Africa and the Middle East, making her way to Holland, where with her brilliance she learned the Dutch language and became a member of the Dutch Parliament. And she has been a lightning rod for the problems in that country, as that government all too frequently does not stand up strongly enough to the right of free speech, right of dissent, and the right of anyone to criticize any religious doctrine at any time. And so for those of us who care about defeating the wicked hand of religious fundamentalism, and for those of us who have had a lifelong dream of seeing women achieve their true equality on this planet, I ask you to join me in the strongest possible welcome for Ayaan Hirsi Ali.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you on her behalf. I've already spoken with her ahead of time, and we are going to go through her book. I've read most of it, and we're just going to talk through the book, and if we have time, we will answer some audience questions if you fill out the cards. Now, Ayaan, one of the questions I had for you right away in the introduction of your book, you talk about how living among the Dutch, you realized after 9/11 that you couldn't be Muslim anymore. What was that like?
It was a relief.
A relief.
Yeah, it was a huge relief. I don't know if my mic is. I have a soft voice, and I'm always made aware of that. Can you hear me at the back? Yes. Louder? It was a relief. I have lived in the US now for 3 years, and I was taught to speak up and articulate. It was a relief because I shared the idea of hell. And some of my fellow believers said, but then you also shared the idea of heaven. And I thought, okay, goodbye, heaven, if it comes at the cost of being burned and broiled and all of those things. So I have to say it was just a relief. It was a relief that I could lead the life that I was leading with no sense of guilt, no sense of sin, and no sense of doing something wrong. That's what it felt like for me to become an atheist.
Wow. And so I guess you slept better at night. I mean, it was actually you felt more peace.
I'm not kidding you. I had the most tense shoulders. That's why I carry my tension. And after I just looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, I don't believe in this nonsense anymore. I don't believe in angels and prophets and spirits and waking up after death and you'll be tortured in the grave and you'll be tested after the grave. And I just felt a sense of relief. And I think many people who, if I had enough money to get myself massaged every week, and I remained in religion, I would be paying and spending a lot of money on that. And I saved a lot of money not having to do that, not having to go through masseuses.
That's fabulous. Now, it's interesting that you mentioned money because right up front in the book you talk about 3 things that the West doesn't completely understand yet about Islam. One of them is the control of girls and women by men. The second one was, I thought was fascinating, the inexperience with money, the inexperience with consumerism, the inexperience with bills within the Islam world, and how hard it makes it for them to move into Western societies and why they tend to live together. I really was more ignorant about that before I read your book. And then that the Quran itself is unquestioned. It's not like you can pick and choose out of the Quran. Now, can you talk a little bit about that issue of the inexperience with money and how that isolates people when they do move into Western societies?
You know, when you read about the clash of civilizations, you read about the clash of the West and Islam, different values, etc. But in my experience living in the West, I found out 3 things that I thought were here. There are 3 universal themes. By universal, I mean it affects everybody all over the world in history. Sexuality, resources, meaning money, and how to deal with money, and violence, aggression, power. And coming to the Netherlands, living in Western countries, coming to the United States, on those 3 things, I thought, well, here is around every theme, the value system that governs these 3 themes in the way I was brought up, with the tribal Islamic way of looking at money, valuing money, who has it, who makes it, who saves it, etc. And the way Westerners looked at it, that was a major difference. Now, that doesn't mean that people within each context have subtle differences and there aren't nuances. There are nuances and there are differences between groups. But in general, growing up as a Muslim woman, I wasn't even supposed to earn my own money. For Muslim men who do make their own money, they are a part of a tribe, a part of a collective, and they're obligated to share whatever they make with the other collective. So if you're a free rider, you free ride. Free riding is not something specifically tribal or specifically Muslim, but it's an opportunity that is created for some, while others, who work hard, who don't want to really share the money that they make. And coming to the Netherlands, first of all, I became a translator, interpreter, and then I became a member of parliament. And my colleagues, members of parliament, and the social workers for whom I was translating were preoccupied with answering the question, how can we make sure that Muslim immigrants to the Netherlands are less poor? They are caught, they are trapped in a cycle of poverty. Do we understand that cycle of poverty? Can we help them out of it? And what I found out was, superficially, the Dutch government was creating programs for people to go to school, to take business classes, to take communication classes, but that is superficial. We were not going down into the attitudes and the values that governed individuals and families and extended families on their attitudes toward money. And I describe in the book, for instance, my own family members. There's one guy in San Diego who's a cousin, and he's a cab driver. And all the money he makes after he pays tax, and sometimes he works for 10 hours a day, so you can't question his work ethic. But as much money as he makes, he sends it back home. His father, who receives the money, uses that money to feed his children. But not only that, he goes and courts another woman and has more children, and he has to build a house for her. And so he appeals to his son here in the United States and says, please help me, I have young babies again. But that cousin of mine, in our upbringing, is not allowed to question his father. Father, why are you taking another wife if you can't pay for the several others that you already have? What about my own life? What about my own pensions? And I worry about my cousin, who is, I know, 2 or 3 years older than I am, and I'm 40 years old. And if the age of retirement in this country is what, 65?
65, unless you work for the state, then it's 40.
And then well, he doesn't work for the state. He works for himself. He's a cab driver. So let's say he's strong enough and resilient enough with his 10 hours a day putting into that kind of lifestyle. He'll find himself at the age of 65, maybe even 70 if he goes on. And he hasn't saved a penny. Because when he's not taking care of his father, he's taking care of that large extended family. And it's something that I relate to, and that is, and we admire the practice and the culture of remittances. Immigrants sending money that they make here back home. But then, and this is what I noticed in the Dutch government and the Dutch society, if you're really interested in helping local immigrants living here becoming citizens of this country out of poverty, then you have to share with them, however hard that is, to relinquish the value system that says half of the money you make, you send it to your extended family so that they can spend it as they wish.
May I read a passage of your book about this?
Yeah.
You talk about there are many good men and women in the West who try to resettle refugees, scold their fellow citizens for not helping, donate money to philanthropic organizations, and so on. These people mean well, I have no doubt, but I believe that their well-intentioned activism is now part of the very problem. To be blunt, their efforts to assist Muslims and other minorities are futile because by postponing or at best prolonging the process of their transition to modernity, by creating the illusion that one can hold on to tribal norms and at the same time become a successful citizen, these proponents of multiculturalism lock subsequent generations born in the West into a no man's land of moral values. That's pretty scary. That is, I think, what we see happening in Europe. Your book is about how it's about to hit the United States.
It is hitting the United States because the United States is also resettling displaced peoples from tribal areas. The State Department resettles Somalis, Afghanis, Iraqis, Palestinians into the United States. And I think that is, from a moral perspective, I think that's noble. I think it's great when you go to people who are on the brink of death, large numbers of them, and you say, welcome to the land of opportunity. That's noble. But then the next step is to say, don't look behind, don't look at the past, but look to the future. And if you become an American, then you teach them. I'm assuming they don't know, because if you are from Somali refugee camps, if you are from refugee camps between the borders of Somalia and Ethiopia, you don't know what it is to live in a capitalist society. You don't know what it is to save money, to earn it, to invest. You don't know what it is to invest in the future of your children. And I think these are norms, these are values that can be taught and can be learned. And I don't underestimate how painful it is to shed the old norms. I go through it every single day. Every time that I speak to my mother, she wants me to go back to Islam, to her way of life, because she's afraid of hell. I don't want to hurt her feelings. I don't want to offend her. It hurts me that she's hurt. But I've realized at one point, I have to move on. So if we all vote for resettling new people, for opening the borders of the United States for people to come in and seek opportunity, then a logical consequence of that is that we have to teach them and sometimes even demand that some of the old values are shed and the new values are learned.
Okay, and I'm kind of taking off on that point. You're an atheist now. This is a fascinating theme throughout your book. You have a call out, basically to U.S. schools of education, colleges, to American feminists, as well as to Christians, to help emancipate Muslim women. And you say that Christians need to provide spiritual support, but not appeasement, as the Archbishop of Canterbury has done in England, where he's saying that Sharia is inevitable in England. You're actually saying, I want to work with the churches in America, the ones who aren't hardcore fundamentalists perhaps, but the ones who are more moderate, and to reach out to these people and somehow bring them into American society. Because you think we actually are in the midst of appeasing, like the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Absolutely. And there is secular appeasement and there is religious appeasement. So the Archbishop is an example of the churches appeasing, and the established churches appeasing radical Islam and tribalism. And we're also appeasing and accommodating the demands of radical Muslims in the name of culture, and it's an appeasement that is done by secular people. After the publication of Infidel, I was accused many times of being an atheist fundamentalist, an enlightenment fundamentalist, being completely intolerant of religions. I have had Muslims who are on the fence, who really say, okay, I've had the same sort of journey, mental journey that you made from Islam to Western values, but I don't want to live without a God. It just makes me feel wonderful and comfortable that there is a force out there that's benign. I just don't want that force to be Allah, but it could be Buddha or Jesus or something else. And I am an atheist. God doesn't do it for me. The hereafter doesn't do it for me. But I respect other people's religions and spirituality. What I refuse to respect is for you to use your convictions or your illusions about a God to take away the freedoms and rights of others. Now, given the fact that I have, and this is just an empirical fact, I have met both in Europe and in the United States many Christians who have a concept of a God who's loving and fatherly and generous and welcoming and inclusive. What I want to do in the book is encourage those Christians to go into Muslim neighborhoods and Muslim communities in the West and offer Muslim communities from third world countries, nowadays politically correct, it's called developing countries, to offer people from developing countries that concept of a God. Why do I say that? Because right now there are activists in the name of jihadist Islam who are going into these communities in California, in New York, in Arizona, all over the United States and all over Europe, and they are offering them a concept of a God who makes some of them feel really powerful, who is a warrior, a winner. Life after death is going to bring you a certain kind of heroism. And there is no theological competition with that concept of a God. There is no enlightenment project. You know, we atheists, we talk amongst one another. We find religious ridiculous, but what do we do after a session like this? We go to the bar, we have a drink, and we are grateful that we are not irrational. But we don't go into these communities, knock on their doors, and tell them, have you considered the writings of John Stuart Mill? Have you considered the writings of Spinoza? Have you considered what it is like? Do you know that life is short and that you can really enjoy it? Invest in life on earth. We don't go preaching to the Muslim demography. The jihadists do that, and they win hearts and minds. They win souls. They win souls. And we look on jealously. And I think what I want to do with this book is, let's join in the competition. We have a better message. We have understood, public relations. Who knows that better than Americans? Who knows competition better than Americans? Let's join in the competition, and you will be surprised. You will be surprised how many individuals born into Islam will abandon a religion. Actually, most of them don't know.
That's fascinating, because as you tell in your book, several of your chapters are about your individual family members, your mom, your dad, your brother. And the theme running through those chapters is how you are unable to bring them over and how they are still in the world of Islam. And your father, of course, passed away. One of the things you mentioned in your chapter 3 called My Mother is this idea that polygamy invites madness, that the fundamental underlying structure of marriage in Islam makes people go nuts, and it doesn't work, and it's filled with hate and jealousy and anger, and the second and third wives, it's not cool, it's just not working, is basically what your chapter is all about. And I don't think most Americans know that. They think that polygamy is working out just fine out there in the Muslim countries. You don't hear much about it. Women aren't attacking their husbands. Why is that? Why don't we get that sense?
I think when Americans are told you've got to respect the cultures of other people, a lot of Americans feel inhibited, and they think, yeah, of course, you've got to, if polygamy works for you, fine. If you choose a life of subjection, fine. But hey, just listen to the sound of the word choose. I'm sure there are many independent, well-educated Muslim women born in free countries who, after they have explored and learned about Islam, choose Islam as their religion, who choose to cover themselves. I'm not denying that. People do that. I mean, people join cults. People do all sorts of things that I will not agree with. But for the majority of Muslim women, the word choice doesn't count. They've been indoctrinated, subordinated. They've been groomed into a submissiveness that comes, if they were to live that, at a high price. Honor killings, honor violence, rejection, and being shunned. Now, given that, if you've been told over and over again your husband can take a second wife and a third one and a fourth wife, and that's the limit, and you are not to object to it, and if you object to it, swallow your objections, in theory, that's fine. But as human beings, we are jealous, and the husband is the provider for the family. And the jealousy of sharing the husband's affections and the husband's material wealth is something that introduces politics into the family and the various siblings of the various wives. And that creates a very insecure home situation in the most intimate of places, the home life. And that just leads to a place where parents don't trust their children, wives don't trust their single husband. How can they? He's probably going to take another wife if he or she's not, problems are not worked out the way in monogamous families they are either worked out or you split up. Here, one of them can split, but the other can't. So that creates already a very, tragic, if not crazy, home life. And it's very good for us, for sociologists, for psychologists, for social scientists to understand this dynamic. And when a lot of, Muslims talk about humiliation, I think that we ought to listen to them. But the humiliation is not so much external. It's not inflicted on them by large entities like the great Satan and the small Satan. It's inflicted on an everyday basis by the men in their own lives. The father on the mother, the brother on the sister, the wife on the husband. And that's the kind of humiliation that one has to understand.
You talk in chapter 10, Islam in America, on the issue of genital mutilation in America. We have read all the horror stories from Africa and from the Middle East. You're saying in the book that not only are girls arriving here who've been mutilated, but that in these closed societies that are developing in this country and Great Britain and Holland, that it's also underway right here around us.
When I was a member of parliament in the Netherlands, we looked into how many young girls were actually mutilated in the Netherlands. And the Dutch government, the Minister of Health, estimated that it was about 60 girls a year. And everyone laughed because we said 60 girls a year, that's a joke. It must be more. And they said, okay, maybe it's 60, maybe it's 100 to 120. Can you imagine that? This is just doubles. In any case, let's say 60. When and where does that happen? Just before the summer vacation, little girls are taken out of school. They are taken to the country of origin or in a country where female genital mutilation is legal. The girls are mutilated, and when the wound heals, then they are brought back to school. So no one can ever detect that it has happened. In the last 2 or 3 years, the American audiences I spoke to thought that this was a specifically European problem. But it's not. There are Muslim communities who live here, who come from Egypt and from Somalia, from Sudan, countries where female genital mutilation is the norm for girls. And the same thing happens. They're taken during the summer vacations, they're mutilated there, and they're brought back here. The American Academy of Pediatrics have decided that they now have an answer to that problem. And they have proposed what they call the nicking option. In other words, 10 years ago, an organization that would not hear about female genital mutilation, any form of it, mild or severe, are now saying, well, let's consider the mild one in order to prevent the severe one from happening.
What is it called?
They've decided to call it the nicking option.
Nicking?
Yeah. You know, my problem
what does
is
that mean?
I've talked about female genital mutilation for so long that I assume you all know everything about it. And
We tried not to, I think.
Yeah, which is what I'm learning now. Female genital mutilation is can be subdivided into 4 forms. One is, please excuse my explicit language, but if I'm not explicit, there's no way I can make you understand it. So imagine a 5-year-old girl or a 6-year-old girl held down by adults. This is option number 1. Her clitoris is tweaked, and a needle is taken and it's pierced into it, it bleeds, and that's called the nicking option or the cleansing option. Sometimes the tip of the clitoris is removed. That's the mildest form. The next one, the second, a substantial part of the clitoris is cut off, and the inner labia are also cut off, and the outer labia are sewn. With the third one, a substantial part of the clitoris is cut off, the inner and outer labia are removed, and it's sewn. And then the fourth one, anything that's protruding in the female genital is scraped out, and the openings of the vagina are scraped, and when that bleeds, they are put together so that that forms a scar. That's the most severe form. That's practiced in Egypt and in Somalia and in Sudan. The Academy of American Pediatrics is saying, in order to stop parents from practicing the 3 severe ones, let's give them the opportunity to do the nicking option. We'll do it in hospital. We'll do it with anesthesia. And so then we'll be sure they won't do that.
Here in the United States, they're proposing
Here in the
this.
United States. This is the American Academy of Pediatrics are proposing this method. And I think it is horrifying. And also, these doctors, very well-meaning, they do not understand that the reason that the opening of the female genital is closed is to ensure that girls remain virgins until their wedding nights. So if you go to parents to say, forget about that, choose the nicking option, what they will most likely do is have her legally nicked and illegally infibulated, meaning illegally closed in the country of origin, and there's no way to detect that. And the only way to prevent that from happening, I think, is not only there's a combination of educating parents on why female genital mutilation in all its forms is bad, why virginity, because that's what they seek. A girl has to be a virgin. And that's something that only men can help with. If Muslim men will only marry a virgin, then parents will continue to seek all kinds of ways of making sure that their daughters are virgins. If they don't sew their genitals, they'll remove them from school, they'll lock them up, they'll control them. So that controlling of the female sexuality has to stop. And to educate both men and women in the idea that a woman can be emancipated, own her own sexuality, earn her own life, and is more than just her hymen.
Well, this brings me to the issue of what you've seen in the colleges and the issue of homeschooling, two education issues. You have been confronted by young Muslim women who are free here in the United States, who undoubtedly know about genital mutilation, maybe have been mutilated. They wear cute little scarves instead of a dark black covering over their entire body. They have freedoms. They want you to shut up. They are arguing with you. And then you talk a little bit later in the book about the incredible social control of U.S. Muslim girls now that homeschooling is happening. They're kept away from normal U.S. educations. It's being allowed. It is the first step, you argue in here at one point, toward this very appeasement we're seeing in Great Britain and other places. Why are education institutions not jumping in and fighting back, basically?
Because education institutions have been infiltrated, number one. They find themselves, Scripps College that I write about in the book, it's only after I speak and they find their own Muslim student population spouting what I call Al-Qaeda language, that other members of the college say, oh my goodness, I thought I knew this girl. I thought she was a friend. I thought she was this. And I thought these students were just American students. There are almost in every college, I don't want to say every college because I haven't been to every college, but to all the colleges I have been, there are so-called Muslim student organizations. They are financed by wealthy people from Saudi Arabia, and if not wealthy, some kind of indirect financing with petrodollars. And in those centers, radical Islamic ideology is propagated, and this is done right under our noses. And we're always surprised when we find young Americans born here, whether they are converts to Islam or whether their parents were born Muslim, just really espousing very radical Islamic stances, wanting to have Sharia or parts of Sharia introduced into the system. So part of it is the infiltration. Another part of it is pure negligence. Again, Americans have been brought up to respect everyone's religion and everyone's culture. So if you have a Muslim center in a college, and you also have a Jewish center, and you have an atheist center, and you have a Christian center, the gentleman's agreement is not to interfere in each other's centers, not to debate with them. So we don't know what's going on in those centers. They're allowed by law, and we think it's enriching. And I think the third one is the cultural relativism that is rampant in many colleges, where there is an attitude by professors and students and student bodies that all cultures are equal, all cultures are the same. And if that's the case, if we assume that all cultures are equal, why should we stand in the way of jihadism? It's just another culture. It's really no better or worse than the libertarian student society.
You know, in the last page of that chapter, Islam in America, page 145, you actually talk about, you wrap up your discussion of this issue by saying, by talking about the, I think you have a kind of an eerie parallel you draw between the U.S. coverage of the mass murderer Malik Hassan and parallels to how the Dutch media handles those sorts of controversies, where the American media tried very hard not to make him sound like a radical Islam adherent when he murdered people on the military base, and you kind of end the chapter with this is a very alarming trend in the American media.
Absolutely. You know, I don't know if you remember, but Nidal Malik Hassan, the trial is, I think, going to be started next week or just in a few weeks. That After he committed atrocious act of killing his colleagues and injuring 32 of them, he killed 13 people and injured 32, knowingly shot at them, screaming, Allahu Akbar, God is great. And the analysis of what happened and his profile comes out, and people start saying, well, maybe because he was mentally ill or he had post-traumatic disorder, because he had been, the assumption was he had gone to combat, and then we realized he could never have post-traumatic disorder because he wasn't in combat, so it's a pre-traumatic disorder. And the pre-trauma was, and everybody just kept on speculating about the Times Square guy. There's speculation now in New York, in the media, that it might have had to do with foreclosures. To which Bloomberg, the mayor of New York, sarcastically repeated, maybe it had to do with healthcare. You can have, you can go through a whole list. In the Netherlands, the man who killed Theo van Gogh stated very clearly that he did it because of his convictions. His religion told him to do that. But we went on speculating about maybe it's because Theo van Gogh had called Muslims goat fuckers before. Maybe it was because the murderer had lost his mother before. Can you imagine that? Proposing as a matter of therapy for a young man who loses his mother or his father, that one of the ways of getting over a trauma, whether it's foreclosures or losing your mother or post or pre-traumatic disorder, is to kill other innocent people? That's the logic. That's what the question begs. If you think you can explain any of these behaviors through some kind of, related to some kind of adversity or misery, then you're opening the door also for other people who are facing different kinds of miseries and adversities in their lives to go on and, consider taking other people's lives. Then you make a statement. But that's not why Nidal Malik Hassan did it. That's not why the murderer of Theo van Gogh did what he did. That's not why the guy who wanted to blow up people in Times Square wanted to do that. All of them have in common that they wanted to do it fi sabilillah, for the sake of Allah. And they were expecting a reward in the hereafter. And that's what I find so frustrating, that we don't address the convictions, the confessed convictions by the murderers or would-be murderers, that we don't address that. We don't address motives anymore. This is the confessed motive. And it's from the 9/11 guys all the way down to Faisal Shahzad, who failed to blow up people and kill people. We make excuses for them. Why are we making excuses for people who say, Allah is my conviction for doing this? These are commands that I believe in, when we don't make excuses for Catholic priests who rape children.
Wow. How are we doing on time? Because we do have some questions from the audience I'm going to read to her. How are we on time? Oh, good. Okay, so I'm going to ask her one or two more questions of my own, and then we'll go to the audience. I was interested in your discussion of how moderate Muslims, and I think you put it in quotes in your book, moderate Muslims, believe that they are doing wrong, that they are failed fundamentalists, essentially. That there's no real parallel in Christianity. Moderate Christians read the Bible and pick and choose what they want to believe, and they're comfortable in their own skin. But that the moderate Muslim, in fact, is not comfortable in his or her own skin. They think they've failed. I have a friend who's Mormon. You would call that a Jack Mormon. They think they've failed, and that the people who are hardcore are the ones who are doing the right thing, and that until Western society accepts this, we're always going to be thinking we're dealing with two different groups when we're not. Is that the message of your book?
Well, I just wanted to make sure, it's very important to clarify what the terms that you use. And when we talk about moderate Muslims, we assume that they are the same as moderate Christians. Now, let me talk to you about Christians who I consider to be moderate. There are Christians that if I have a discussion with them and say, do you think that the world was created in 6 days because that's what the Bible says? Do you really believe that? A moderate Christian will say, oh no, that's nonsense. That's just in the Bible. That's parable. Is the Bible God's word? No. It's written by man, And I don't believe in everything that's in the Bible. And all these, smite kids against rocks and stuff like that, that's, just don't take that at face value. That's nonsense. But what I pick out of the Bible is this idea of treat others as you would like them to treat you, love thy neighbor, turn the other cheek. In other words, you look at the Bible and you shop out of it and you discuss everything that you don't like about the Bible. That's just nonsense. That's a parable. Muslims, moderate or not moderate, will not say that substantial parts of the Quran are nonsense. They will say everything in the Quran is the true word of God. They will defend the image of the religion. They will defend the Prophet Muhammad and his moral guidance. And yet they will say they're against terrorism, they're against violence, they're against misogyny. And that contradiction, that dissonance, is something that the moderate Muslim has not resolved intellectually by thinking about it, but has resolved it simply by not practicing it. But like the husband of, I don't know if you read the book Not Without My Daughter, there are lots of Muslims who first do not practice Islam for a long time and then go back to it. And that's because they did not resolve that intellectually. They didn't reason with the idea, didn't understand that you have the way you live when you lead a life of a liberal modern person, that you actually, in practice, denying a lot of the stuff in the Quran and the moral guidance of Muhammad. So for a Muslim to be truly moderate, it will be someone like Irshad Manji. I don't know if you've met or heard of Irshad Manji, of Canadian. She's of Indian origin, was born in Uganda, lived in Canada, and now is at Yale. She calls herself a Muslim, but says that all large parts of the Quran should not be followed. She's considered to be a heretic by the majority of Muslims. She's threatened, and she's not the only one. There are so many other Muslims like that who are willing to say, let us just negate large parts of the Quran, but then they are not considered to be Muslims at all. And as I experienced in Canada, when I had a debate with some Muslims and I said, look, if you want to follow the example of the Prophet Muhammad in his preaching for generosity and taking care of orphans, that's fine. But if you follow his preaching and his example in taking child brides and killing the infidels, you're going to get into trouble. And the answer I got from one of the Canadian people was, look, if I don't follow the example of Prophet Muhammad, am I a Muslim then? And that's a question that Muslims have to answer for themselves. But unless that question is answered in the way we want to, then I don't think there is such a thing as moderate Islam.
You know, toward the end of her book, page 245, I think this audience might particularly be interested. You call on atheists, free marketers, people who believe in democracy to sort of bury the hatchet on their own wars with each other and their own disagreements, joining with Christians to confront Islam. So you're saying, and feminists. So you're saying all of these disparate groups in America need to bury the hatchet on their domestic battles and their spiritual battles with each other and confront Islam. And so that's one of the page 245, everybody, when you buy her book. I'm going to move to the audience questions, but there is one that's not a question. It's sort of a love letter from a Mr. Alvarez, and I'm just going to give that to you. I don't know, maybe it's a Mrs. Alvarez, I don't know, but it's not a question. It's more of a love letter from a huge fan. So there you go. Thank you. She might want to read it out loud. I'm going to just quickly read a few of the questions that the audience asked, and why don't you just go ahead and pick the one you want to answer first. I'm going to read them quickly. What do you think about the recent May 20th Draw Muhammad Day on Facebook? Another one says, I've read some studies of Islam that say Islam is today where Christianity was several centuries ago, that Islam will have an age of enlightenment. What is your opinion? Another one says, how do you think people rise above their teaching and become independent thinkers? What are your thoughts on the South Park censorship? And finally, in Nomad, you recommend proselytizing by moderate Christians as a tool to counter Islamic preaching. But what role in this struggle for the hearts and minds do you see for free thinkers and secular humanists? A lot of questions. Which one do you want to go with?
I think I'll just cluster the ones on free expression, South Park, Draw Muhammad Day. they're all addressing the same thing. Islam is another ideology. It is a prescription for how people ought to live with one another. The emphasis is on ought. And when in the West, and this is, I think, what makes the West distinct, and America especially, distinct from other societies, is when you put an idea on the table, everybody comes around and discusses it and talks about it, where the idea came from, etc. And so if we have a substantial number of people living in the United States and elsewhere, it's 1.5 billion people who identify themselves as Muslim today, who propose the idea that we should live according to the dictates and the prescription for society, political, social, spiritual, of Muhammad, then I think if you follow Western tradition, the logical thing to do is to ask yourself, who's Muhammad? When was he born? What did he say? And there are some of his ideas that may appeal to you. Like I said, take care of the orphans and be generous and take care of your neighbors, be hospitable. But there are some ideas that you think, hey, wait a minute, kill the infidels, ambush them, take their property. That doesn't really feel like that's very tolerant. Women should be veiled and confined to their homes, etc. That's interesting. And so then you start talking about Muhammad. And some of the things that Westerners do is they draw cartoons and they make movies and comedies, and South Park, makes fun of all kinds of ideas about other people that they don't like or they may like, but, make fun of. And I think that's very interesting and that's enriching. And for Muslim Americans to be included, to be truly American, they have to get used to the idea of having their icon, Muhammad, and the Quran scrutinized, ridiculed. They have to get used to the idea that it's okay for others to blaspheme, and that the response to blasphemy is not to blow people up, not to stab and behead your critics, but to engage them. And if you are too angry to engage them, maybe just ignore them. Maybe draw other cartoons. But violence is not an option. That's what I think about it.
Okay, last question of particular interest to this crowd. The issue of what role do you see for freethinkers and secular humanists? Are you suggesting we support Christian proselytizing, or how do people in this audience do it?
Well, I had written Infidel and participated in numerous debates about the presence of radical Islam in the 21st century. It's growing at a very fast pace, and the demography that is taking to it are very, very young. And I wanted to experiment with ideas that did not involve military action or law enforcement action. So, a colleague of mine in the Netherlands, who was a member of parliament for my party but now has started his own party, proposes that you shoot potential terrorists in the knees. Put them in boats and deport them, that kind of thing. I didn't want to do that kind of thing. I was thinking about ways of pushing back on radical Islamic propaganda without having to use violent means. And that brought me to the idea, is it possible to have a strategic coalition with people that I passionately disagree with on abortion, on the existence of God, on homosexuality, on all of the things that you can agree or disagree with, but with whom I agree on one thing, which is for all of us who disagree on things, we can talk about it, publish about it, and try to influence one another through persuasion. That's what feminists and atheists and moderate Christians have in common. Disagree, but use legal, non-violent means to persuade one another of one another's perspectives. Is it possible to have a strategic coalition with those three groups and say we have a potential enemy in radical Islam because they don't want to use persuasion or maybe gradually until they're large enough to use violence, and to compete with them for the hearts and minds of those people and those communities that they target? And can we infiltrate in those, not just infiltrate, but penetrate those communities and offer them something different? And that something different doesn't have to be only the Enlightenment values that are dear to me, but you can offer them, if you're a moderate Christian, an alternative theology, a theology of peace and tolerance, a theology of life on earth, not one that you have to die fast to get to. Feminists appealing to Muslim women to say, why do you have to cover yourself in order to protect men from their own sexuality? And what is the message as a woman who's covered? What is the message that you are sending to women who are not covered? Are you implying that they are whores? That they're immodest? That kind of engagement, can we do that with American Muslims? Can we even contemplate of such a strategic alliance? I think it's attractive. I think we've had consensus on more things that are less challenging, and I think this is really, really urgent.
Good luck to you in your journey. You're an amazing woman. We have run out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.